Ended here, and then the second stage, and the third stage. And the Apollo 11 spacecraft is up here. Now when this thing took off, this first stage took off. It took off with a mighty roar. It just shook the ground, and people could see it and hear it and feel it for miles around. And it went off, and by the time this thing was 42 miles in the air, in just 2.5 minutes, it was doing 6,000 miles an hour. Wow. Crazy. Wow. At that point, this thing was empty. They had to drop it off to go into the ocean. So this part and this ring came off and went into the ocean. Meanwhile, the very top escape rocket, which is there just in case something should happen, well, they didn't need it anymore, so they left it too. So now this part, it has 5 smaller engines. There's 5 big engines down here and 5 smaller ones right within this housing here. So it's ready to take off some more. By the time it got up to 110 miles in the air, it was doing 16,000 miles an hour.
Whoa.
That's crazy fast.
Wow.
Really, really fast. Then it was time to drop it off. So this and this skirt came off, and inside here was one smaller engine. So the rocket's getting lighter and lighter all the time, and needs less and less thrust to keep going faster and faster. So finally, this part took off into orbit. And it finally got up into orbit, which was about 24,000 miles an hour, and shut the engines off. And you can do that in space. There's no drag, there's no air, nothing to stop it or slow it down. So they can just go into orbit. So here's what's going on. We've got, now if the Earth was like 2 inches big, the moon would be about that small, it would be about 5 feet away. So it's really far away. But for this case, I'm going to draw it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So we've got the Earth here, kind of lopsided, but that's all right. And we got, let's put the moon here. Okay. And they took off, got into orbit, they went around the Earth, and then finally they turned the engines back on and headed for the moon. Okay. 45 minutes after that, these 4 doors around this section opened up, and inside, this is the lunar lander. Okay? Now normally the legs are folded up on the inside, they're more like that when it's in here so it can fit. But now, when those doors opened up, they had to perform a very tricky maneuver. They were headed towards the moon, and this thing was, below in the rocket. So while they're headed towards the moon, they had to turn around backwards and dock with this. And then they switched around so they were like this, back toward the moon again. Now they're headed towards the moon, which is, now wait a minute, the moon's over here and we're going that way. Does anybody know why?
Because the moon is moving.
Because the moon is moving, that's right. The moon's coming up this way. And it's going to be right here to meet it when the spacecraft gets there in 3 days. Who thinks it would be fun to ride in this rocket? Would it be fun?
Maybe.
You know what? Those astronauts were brave. In that tiny little capsule up there, this rocket is taller than the power tower at Cedar Point. It's 60 feet taller than the power tower. 3 little chairs next to each other with barely enough room for them to reach up to the instruments. And they had to be in that thing for a week. Except for a little time on the moon. So the guys crawled into this spot right here. This was docked up like that. And 2 of the astronauts, there's 2 guys on the end, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, climbed into this thing, and Michael Collins stayed in the other craft and just went around and around the moon for a while. And this thing landed on the moon. Okay? So after a while, after a few hours, they said they had a planned sleep schedule. They were supposed to take a nap. And they went, please, can we go on the moon? And they finally said, okay, go on the moon. So they got out, and they walked around for about 2.5 hours on the moon. Now they planted a flag, and the flag had a rod in the top to hold the flag out like this, which is a lot of people think that there was a wind on the moon because there's no air on the moon. And since there's no air, there's no sky. So in the daytime, the sky is still black. The ground is all lit up, but the sky is black because there's no air to bounce the light around and light up the sky. So anyway, they planted the flag. They put down some seismic reading equipment, which could tell if there's earthquakes on the moon. They put down solar wind reading equipment. And they put down corner reflectors, which if you hit now, today, if you hit them with a laser, you can tell how far away the moon is within that much distance. Because those corner reflectors bounce the light right back to where it came from. So anyway, they spent, even though it was only 2.5 hours walking around on the moon, they spent 21 hours on the moon. Poor Michael Collins, he was up there orbiting the moon. And every time he went around to the backside of the moon, he was in contact with no one. No radio contact with anybody. Wow, that was brave. Okay, so anyway, it was time for him to take off. Now this thing's useless. No more fuel in there. So this part took off. And it came back up to meet Michael Collins in this spaceship. And the 2 astronauts climbed back inside with him, and they let this go. Now that's flying around the moon somewhere. So now they're coming back to Earth. Okay? Now, when they finally get back to Earth, let's go ahead and finish around this plot up, okay? So they went around the moon, and he was orbiting and stuff, and then they came back. They fired the engines one more time so they could head back to Earth. Now, coming back into the Earth's atmosphere, they have to be very careful. When you enter the air at thousands of miles an hour, the wind creates friction. I want everybody to rub your hands together really fast. Feel the heat? That's friction. Now, if you're running several thousands of miles an hour through the atmosphere, you will actually start fire. And that's what happens. If they hit the atmosphere, like here's the atmosphere, here's the Earth. If they hit the atmosphere too shallow, they'll bounce off and skip like a rock and be gone forever. If they hit it too steep, they'll burn up. So they have to hit it just right. In the meantime, when this separated and turned around, this round heat shield headed toward the atmosphere. And it was designed to burn and protect the astronauts while they were coming back through. Now, when that fire surrounded the spacecraft, they had no communication with them. The ground crew didn't know if they were going to be all right or not. Made all the calculations. It should be okay. In a couple minutes, they finally got the message that they were good. They came down and they released 3 big parachutes and came down into the ocean, splashed down. And then a big raft inflated around this. And there was a ship nearby with a helicopter that came and flew over and dropped a basket. The astronauts got in that, and they went back to the ship. And that's how we went to the moon. So, is there any questions? Any questions? How did I put that together? It's made of heavy cardboard tubes, and it's made of shiny plastic banner material, and there's some plastic sticky material that I cut out, and I got letters cut from a sign company who were friends of mine. And it took some time and some care, but it also took a passion for this. And it also took that little golf tee right on top that I found in the middle of a field while I was walking through the field going, what am I going to use for the top? And I looked, and there it was. How about that?
Yeah, that's got it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful replica that you made.
Well, thank you.
And a good demonstration. I never knew a lot of that stuff. Probably a lot of kids here.
I hope everybody learned something. That was a lot of fun. Thank you very much, everybody.